Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. A little while back, I offered a list of Orientalist masterpieces for beginners, and the word Orientalist occasioned a certain amount of comment because supposedly that isn't politically correct anymore. But we all agreed that we don't give a damn about what's politically correct and what isn't, especially if the word is accurate in describing what we're speaking about, right? Yes, so here is the second list of 10 more Orientalist masterpieces, this time not just for beginners. Of course, everything is for everyone, right? We all know that. It's like young people's concerts. They're really for the parents. Don't tell the kiddies. They want to be playing their video games. The parents want to hear about this stuff. Well, yes. So people who are even experienced listeners find a lot in the beginners list, and the beginners will find a lot in the experienced list. I just have to categorize them somehow. So don't worry what's in them. Just listen to them. That's the point. So 10 more Orientalist masterpieces. And some of these are going to be, I think, very interesting. I really do. I think we've got some things to talk about. And at the top, one of my favorite works that I just made a video about, actually, is something I collect compulsively. Saint-Saëns, Piano Concerto No. 5, the Egyptian. Actually, the only vaguely Orientalist part of it is the middle movement, which is incredibly beautiful and mysterious and fantastical. It's wonderful. The rest of it is just good, clean fun with fabulous tunes and wonderfully virtuosic piano writing. It's just gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. So that's something you really need to listen to. If you didn't take the hint from the last video we did about this work. Next, Carl Nielsen, his Aladdin suite. Yes, it's Danish Oriental. An interesting combination because, Nielsen had such a characteristic harmonic language. And you can hear that throughout the Aladdin suite, on top of which he superimposes this sort of exotic, I don't know what you'd call it, Orientalist thing. You can tell that it's an Orientalist piece. But on the other hand, it sounds just like Carl Nielsen. It's just fabulously wonderful. It has The Market at Isfahan, which is an amazing piece that has different bits of the orchestra all doing their own thing in free rhythm without any kind of other coordination. And it's so nifty. I mean, Nielsen did that. He did it in Sagadrom, too. He liked to have small bits of freely rhythmic contrapuntal combinations of things and stuff like that. He was a much more modern composer than people give him credit for. But the difference is that he knew how to use his modernisms, within the context of his language overall. So it's an absolutely fabulous piece. It's got the great Oriental march at the beginning and the crazy finale, and sometimes it has a chorus hooting and oohing and ahhing behind it, and sometimes not, but it doesn't matter. Either way, it's fabulous. Stravinsky, the Song of the Nightingale. I don't know why people don't think about this when they do sort of Orientalist pieces. It's a beautiful work. The problem with it, actually, it does have an issue. The issue is that it's a big decrescendo. In other words, it begins with this wonderful explosion of color and texture, and then you've got this Chinese march, and it's really fun. And then the Song of the Fisherman, which is a beautiful, cool trumpet solo, but then it becomes very lyrical and calm and stays that way for most of its second half. And so it's not a work that gets performed all that often because it's kind of a downer in concert. And when you hear it in concert, but it is absolutely lovely and full of beautiful, evocative tunes and things, and it's quite a nice work that deserves some extra attention. It's from the same period as, The Firebird and the Rite of Spring and Petrushka and all that stuff. It's vintage, early, mature Stravinsky. So give it a listen if you don't know it. It actually was derived from an opera of the same title, The Nightingale, the Song of the Nightingale. And the whole opera is beautiful, too. Really quite interesting. So that's that. Then we have my all-time favorite piece of imperialist fluff, Elgar's The Crown of India's Suite. It does contain his greatest work, The March of the Mughal Emperors. Oh my goodness, is that a hot number? It also has the dance of the Nautch girls. I don't know what a Nautch girl is or why they're dancing. I guess they take their notches and they dance with them. But oh my goodness, a piece of shameless imperialism. And I love imperialism. Oh, imperialism was such a good thing. I know people are doing their best to try and piss on it, but I don't buy it. I don't buy it because if you take away the imperialism and you look at how wonderful life was before the imperialists showed up, you realize everybody's just as horrible everywhere. That's why it doesn't matter, because people are awful everywhere. Let's just keep that in mind. That's my entire view of this whole politically correct foolishness about all of that stuff. And if imperialism gives us the crown of India suite, then I'm okay with it. So there. Next, Bloch Shelomo. Oh, this is another somewhat controversial piece. And really very interesting question, isn't it? Because, first of all, Shelomo is a cello concerto, essentially a tone poem for cello and orchestra, and it's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous and fabulous. It used to be much more popular than it is now. Why? Probably because it's Orientalist. But here's the point. The whole problem with, critique of Orientalism is that it's European cultural hegemony. It's the Europeans trying to impose their cultural values or usurp the cultural prerogatives of Asian or Orientalist other cultures, as if those other cultures can't fend for themselves, which is just, part of the entire sort of condescendingness of the politically correct position. However, what do you do with Jews? Jews are always a problem, aren't we? Ha ha! Why? Because, well, yes, Bloch was Swiss. He was supposedly European. But he is evoking, legitimately, I think, in an idiom which is fully, valid, his own Jewish heritage, which is, of course, Eastern, Asian. So are not European Jews entitled to use the Orientalist or Asian language or idiom or whatever you want to call it in getting in touch with their own ethnic history and origins? It's a very, very interesting question, isn't it? And one which would be probably inextricably tied up with the inherent and latent anti-Semitism of much of the politically correct community out there. I know this is all so controversial, but, every so often a little doesn't hurt. But it's an interesting question. It's a valid question, isn't it? So Bloch Shelomo and his other Jewish works is a wonderful example of the not simple, the argument to not take a simplistic approach to these things. There are nuances, and it's a wonderful work. Then we have Alexander Cherepnin, his Piano Concerto No. 4, which is based entirely on Chinese melodies. His wife was Chinese. He loved Chinese music, and he wrote this gorgeous piano concerto based on Chinese music, as did Avshalomoff in his flute concerto. Avshalomoff was a Jewish composer, Russian composer, who wound up in Shanghai for various reasons, fleeing anti-Semitism and whatnot. And he wrote a whole series of absolutely gorgeous works based on authentic Chinese melodies and Chinese tunes, and they're beautiful. And his flute concerto is certainly one of them. You should give it a shot. It's on Marco Polo, and along with his other works, some of his symphonies and other things, they are really, really interesting. It's another example of somebody whose Orientalism is entirely, first of all, respectful, and second of all, authentic. And he happens to be, of European origin. And we talked about the previous list, video, the fact that Russians generally, or the Russian school, has every right to be Orientalist because Russia goes all the way to Japan, right? So yeah, there's that too, and they have a border with Mongolia and China and all those places. So it's definitely not, again, a simple question of European imperialist cultural whatever appropriation. No one's appropriating anything there. They have a legitimate right to that stuff. Sibelius, He did Belshazzar's Feast, believe it or not. A wonderful, absolutely wonderful bit of Finnish exotica. And there's quite a bit of Finnish exotica, actually, because if you've ever been to Finland, you know that, they could, they need all the exotica that they can get up there. The winters are very long, and a little exotica freshens the pot. It's nice to have. It's a beautiful work. A little short piece, 4 movements or so, not terribly long, but he made a suite, which we never get to hear. And it has a wonderful Oriental march, actually, which you can compare to the march at the beginning of Nielsen's Aladdin suite. And you'll have a wonderful time with this sort of Scandinavian, Orientalist, Asian cultural appropriation. Oh, God, that's fun, isn't it? Then we've got a wonderful violin concerto. There's a lot of actually sort of Orientalist concertos in this list. Castelnuovo-Tedesco, his violin concerto number 2, The Prophets. Now, Castelnuovo-Tedesco was another Jewish composer who sometimes got in touch with his Jewish roots in a way similar to what Bloch did, by writing music that sounds kind of like a Hollywood Bible pick, a Bible epic film score sort of thing. It's a beautiful concerto. It's full of wonderful, wonderful, slushy, romantic, Asian, culturally appropriated tunes. And if you don't know it, you really ought to hear it. Itzhak Perlman recorded it. And it's absolutely wonderful. I think Heifetz did too, didn't he? I don't know. I think so. He wrote it for Heifetz. It's just marvelous. And last but not least, here's one that's really going to surprise you. Debussy's La Mer. Yes. Oh, it's such cultural appropriation. No, Debussy's La Mer was inspired by that famous painting, The Giant Wave, by Hokusai. I mean, there's a bunch of versions of this print. It's a big print with this big wave with like fingers almost coming out of it. These panicky fishermen in a boat who are about to get swamped by the giant wave. Debussy was almost always inspired by visual media, by sketches and whatnot. And many of those were of Asian origin because at that time, around the turn of the 20th century, Japonisme was, another trend. I mean, the Asian and the World Exposition from the 1880s and all that stuff. I mean, Asian and Orientalist objets d'art and other things were all the rage, particularly in France. And composers took that as a license to go wild and create reflections of Orientalist thought and imagery and philosophy and melody and music. And Debussy was definitely one of those guys who went for it. And La Mer is one of the most beautiful and iconic examples of the fruitful merger of Western and Asian artistic thought. Really a wonderful work. And nobody thinks of it that way. People always just think of it as, well, the sea. But it is a specific sea. It's the Sea of Japan. So there you go, friends. 10 more Orientalist masterpieces, not just for beginners. Things that they will delight your auditory sense, and maybe some of them will get you to think about some of the horrific nonsense that surrounds our enjoyment, what ought to be our simple enjoyment, frankly, of the great masterpieces of Western art, whatever they happen to be based on. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.